name is Bhupesh Deharia, and let me see if I can really meet up the expectations the way I have been introduced. There's a whole lot of burden on my shoulder. So I have spent over 25 years primarily into education technologies, higher education, and we were the first one in India to start an academic institution which was started with industry and academic collaboration rather than coming under some university, because way back then universities were traditional in the approach, and we thought that we need to really come up with some product which could suit to the industry need, and that's how we collaborated with Bharti Airtel. Bharti Airtel supported IIT Delhi in 2001 and 2000. Sunil and Rajan Mittal, they supported us, and that's how we came into existence. And that is a rare example in India, which started with industry and academic collaboration. And seeing that success, 2015, we joined hands with IBM and we launched Asia's first postgraduate program in data science, postgraduate program in cybersecurity, and postgraduate program in applied AI. I also run a company called MG Campus, which is currently powering online examination for a lot of institutions, major IIMs, NITI, and all top institutions. Just 2 days back, we finished entrance examination for Goa University. We started online testing way back in 2006, and we ourselves use a lot of AI techniques, facial recognition techniques, which I will be giving demonstration, and how to really conduct the secure examination, wherein our system can recognize the face while students are appearing for the examination. And during this COVID also, so we also have a Center for Data Science for Social Good, Professor Nivas, and I'm glad to share with you that when this COVID started, all our faculty members and students came together and we launched a product which is called Corona Khojo. It is a mobile app to enforce home quarantine. And initially, all of us, we are aware that this whole disease is spread because we could not really enforce the home quarantine, and we use a lot of deep learning, AI, and various exponential technologies in that. With this, let me start my brief presentation, what I'm going to really talk about. So today's agenda is demystifying AI, machine learning, data science, analytics, and big data. And that's what my topic is. And I'll try to really demystify, because people think that all these areas, data science, AI, machine learning, deep learning, statistics, they all are in silo. I'll try to really bust this myth that they all are part of the same ecosystem and the same objective. And the primary objective is to basically take the decision at a right time, decision at a scale, and the correct decision. And that perhaps is the philosophical objective of every education we undergo. And the classical example is, of course, Google Map. In Google Map, I recommend all of participants to please switch off your video. And this video should be only activated by only speakers, Vice Chancellor Professor Deva. Rest other participants, kindly switch off your video to avoid any kind of disturbance in this meetup. That's my humble request. And please, administration team, please take care of that. Now, so my agenda is that we'll talk about where we are going in technology. We talk about a lot of future is coming, and then I will try to really bust myth that most of the future things has already happened. We'll talk about what is next in COVID-19, because I have been hearing and talking to the students, thousands of the students, and most of them, they're depressed. Some of them, they got the offer. They're not very clear what will happen, whether the universities will open, not open, right? They're very concerned about their future. And on top of that, this China-India crisis. We'll briefly touch about ages, which I already spoke about. What are the opportunities in AI, data science, this exponential technology? Then I'll talk about what is AI, machine learning, deep learning, how big data is related to deep learning, machine learning, and at last, what is data science? What is the difference between data analyst, business analyst, data analyst? Then what are the tools and competencies which is needed to really launch your career into this field? And and if you have any questions, any concerns, I would be happy to really address those even during this presentation. So let me start with a very small video, which will really give some idea about what kind of future we are getting into.
4 years ago, we started to wonder, what would shopping look like if you could walk into a store, grab what you want, and just go? What if we could weave the most advanced machine learning, computer vision, and AI into the very fabric of a store so you never have to wait in line? No lines, no checkouts, no registers. Welcome to Amazon Go. Use the Amazon Go app to enter. Then put away your phone and shop it. It's really nuts. Take whatever you like.
So this video is available on YouTube. You can watch. Just I wanted to really give you a brief. And this is, we are not talking about future. This is, we are talking about past. This Amazon Go store was open in Seattle in 2017. We're talking about past, and you don't have to really swipe your credit card or debit card. You just enter, take any stuff and just move out, right? And automatically by complex uh, computer vision algorithms, machine learning, natural language processing, and complex AI and software engineering. This has been possible where an automatic transaction will be happening, and the good stuff will be automatically put into the cart. And this kind of technology will become much more prominent in post-COVID, where people would like to really get into no-touch kind of scenario. And Bangalore airport is a perfect example, which has deployed a lot of no-touch technology. I would like to also show you very brief about this video, which you might have seen. This is a video of a pepper.
こんにちは、ケントさん。元気ですか?
Oh, Japanese. Hi, Pepper.
Wow, there are a lot of people here.
Okay, so could you introduce yourself?
My name is Pepper. I'm a completely new species of social humanoid robot, designed by SoftBank Robotics.
Okay, so could you tell us how have you been?
It's been a big year for me. I'm working in all sorts of companies, like banks, retail stores, and hotels, to help customers have the best possible experience. I've even been adopted in homes in Japan.
Okay, so you've been very busy.
So, this paper video, I think most of you must have seen, but let me give you a brief idea. This paper is a joint project of SoftBank and IBM. And this was launched in 2015, and within 2 days of launch, almost 5,000 units were sold in Japan. And 2016, IBM CEO, former CEO Ginni Rometty was here in India to launch IBM Watson in Bangalore. I was fortunate to really attend this launch ceremony. I visited Hotel Leela in Bangalore, and the moment I entered into the Leela lobby, I saw this pepper, which is a humanoid, which is not a robot, dancing on a tune of a song called Gangnam Style, and it was singing as well. And just before that, I saw Star Wars. I was in that mood, and I was really thrilled to really see this robot dancing and singing. And then once it finished the dance, everybody started shaking hand, and it started introducing, "Hi, my name is Pepper, and I'm powered by IBM Watson." I also went ahead, shook my hand, and then the conference started. There were almost 300 people there, odd people. And after Ginni Rometty, the VP of IBM invited Pepper on a stage, and Pepper just walked like a human being on a stage, and started introducing himself. And this is a similar launch video I picked up from internet. This was the launch of Tokyo. And when the Pepper was addressing, I had a goosebumps, right? I literally, I had a goosebump. I could not ever imagine that someday will come wherein I will be hearing robot addressing to the audience. Now this has become pretty common. Now you can really see Sophia addressing thousands of leaders. And we have seen these kind of stuff in Hollywood movies. And then we thought that all these things will come in future. Unfortunately or fortunately, all these things has become a part of past. All right. So the message which I want to really give, that the future has already invaded into our past, invaded into the present. The only difference is this: the future is not equally distributed. This future is lying in IBM research, maybe Google research in Bangalore, or in Seattle, or in Silicon Valley. So this is not equally distributed as we are not aware, and how pervasive these technologies are, and it is impacting our life every day. Now let's see the power of this Watson, which is the soul of this Pepper. But in next couple of years, you'll see that you'll not be finding human being working in a call centers. You will be having IBM Watson kind of AI or cognitive softwares, which will be addressing to human queries, because they are much better than human than doing the repeated work. They will never get tired, and they will learn much faster. They don't have the mood swings like a human being. uh, Now, what will happen to the human being? Human being will get engaged in much better jobs, much better work, and they are not going to replace the human being. They are going to really generate more and more number of opportunities, which I will be talking about. Right. Let us see what impact it is bringing in healthcare. Uh, IBM Watson can read roughly around 800 million documents. Please note, it can read 800 million documents, which means 80 crore pages it can really read. I was fortunate to study with one of the brightest mind, my room partner, Ashutosh Kulsresh, was a All India grade topper in 95. His percentile was 99.9 in percentile. This guy used to take almost 5 to 6 minutes to read one page of Milman Healthcare. Of course, I used to take 15, 20 minutes, and still I can't really confidently tell that I could read even those pages. This paper, this IBM Watson can read 80 crore pages in per second, and that's the power. And where this power is being used to treat cancer patients. So in Bangalore, right here in India, Manipal hospital chain has deployed IBM Watson to read millions of research paper which comes on cancer. It is also helping doctors in terms of diagnosing cancers, and at the same time also prescribing what kind of treatment it can really offer. So IBM Watson kind of technologies will democratize the way healthcare is being offered. My dear friend, Dr. Geeta, she also launched a company called Niramai. She used to work for Xerox Research Center, and Dr. Manish Gupta, who's now director of Google. He and Dr. Geeta and the entire team were doing a lot of research on breast cancer prediction for a long years back. Dr. Geeta launched this startup Niramai in Bangalore. What they're doing, they just based on the thermal image, and just you put the camera on a thermal camera on a mobile phone, and take a photograph. They have been able to really detect and diagnose the breast cancer, which typically requires millions of dollars of machinery, and that they are able to do with just 35,000 rupees, 1,000 rupees Android camera, and 25,000 rupees thermal camera. Cure AI in Bombay has analyzed millions of X-ray images, and they have accelerated the process of diagnosing any kind of issue with your bone structure, and they are pioneers in this area. If we talk about corona virus or COVID-19, now and then the AI researchers, they have built a model. They are applying deep learning to scan uh, CT scans or chest X-rays to analyze whether you have pneumonia-led normal pneumonia, or you have pneumonia due to COVID-19. So you don't have to really wait for say 12 hours or 24 hours for a diagnostic report, whether you have a corona positive or not. Just looking at the CT scans and applying deep learning algorithms, you're able to really tell within fraction of a second whether this person is suffering with COVID or not. So there has been a lot of such a use cases. At Aegis, we also launched Corona Kojo to enforce home quarantine, and we are using a lot of learning technologies for that. So it is heavily being used in healthcare, in automobile, it's in airline. Government of India is currently using it to identify tax defrauds. And in the last couple of years, you must have seen the number of those who are filing for income tax. This number has increased, and the major technology behind that is basically big data and data science. Uh, let's see where the future is going, right? What will happen during or post COVID-19? I thought let me spend 2 minutes time to actually give some perspective to these thousands of career aspirants, students, because everybody is afraid that what will happen to their future. Let's see, you don't have to really worry about that. If you see historically, whenever any downturn happens because of pandemic or because of war, which we have seen 100 years back when the Spanish flu hit 1918, after that, the economy took a upward surge. After First World War, after Second World War, Japan, when it was destroyed, immediately after the war, the economic activities took exponentially shape. Moreover, what is happening in next 6 months time, India will be having a huge influx of investment, which is in tune of $170 billion. And this money is actually major reason for the cause of tension between India and China. And I read a couple of research papers which says that this war is not about the border. War is about AI and data. This is war is about supremacy in AI. Tension between America and China is about of AI and data. Whosoever really takes this AI revolution lead this whole world, and that's typically a war. Blacklisting, TikTok, of course, their privacy issues are there, but India want to really protect its data because data is primarily essential for a fuel for the entire AI and data science or any deep learning algorithm. Uh, the next war are going to be led by cyber commandos with the power of AI. So you don't have to really worry about this whole investment, which $170 billion will be invested in next 6 months or a year's time. This will generate millions and millions of the job. And we have seen that we can really criticize government of India on various fronts. We have all the right, but I think government of India has also done very significantly, and specifically government has recognized the importance of AI and data science, and Ministry of Science and Technology is working on that area. India has become one of the largest manufacturer for the mobile phone. Major investment will be going into edtech, online education, collaborative technologies, video collaboration, remote working. Massive investment is happening in technology. And as I told you, we run this company, Immuni Campus. During this lockdown, we are hiring every day. We are hiring people for SQL, AI, data engineering, right? PHP, even PHP developers we are hiring, Android developers we are hiring. So there are a lot of tech hiring is happening. Companies and people are working right from their home. So the business is not shut down. So don't worry about your future. Your future is pretty bright. And you're born, fortunately, in the best country, India, which will become the next China because world's love affair with the China is already over. Now the world will invest, the entire West in India, and India will become the next China in terms of our GDP, in terms of technology growth. And you guys need to really get ready and use this time of COVID-19, prepare yourself, learn yourself. And I'm really glad that Professor Srinivasan, who's a helm of affair of JNTU, which is one of the largest university, took a lot of initiative to really launch courses. And sir, I would like to express my commitment that we'll be open to really collaborate with you and offer a lot of programs and make skills available to the students. Now, we have collaboration.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Bhupesh. I heartfully invite you. Let us plan in a big way.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. So we have collaboration with IBM, NVIDIA, UBTech, AWS, right? We have also launched, we do Aegis Graham Bell Award for last 10 years we have been organizing, and all companies like Accenture, IBM, TCS, Airtel, all these top companies, they participate. We also have, for showcasing their innovation startups, we also have a segment which is called Aegis Graham Bell Awards for talent hunt. This is primarily to hunt the talent, those who are studying in engineering colleges. And Professor Srinivas, I would like to really tell you that this year we have given a scholarship to 40 students, 100% scholarship to study cyber security, data science, and AI program. And in last phase, 20 students were awarded by Dr. Windsor, who is the founder for Father for Internet, and he was innovator for TCP/IP, which all of us we have studied. And in the first phase, 20 students got scholarship by AICT Chairman Dr. Anil Sahasrabudhe and Honorable Minister Nitin Gadkari ji. And all these 40 students will be studying, if the campus will not start in September, they will be studying online, and they will be doing research on breast cancer prediction, how to apply AI in education, how to stop, how to take care of the traffic issues, how to eradicate, how to stop child trafficking and women trafficking. So these are the various areas where Aegis is working, and these students will be applying their knowledge and doing research in this area. So we are very much applied into nature, because I believe that whatever the knowledge you're gaining, if you cannot apply, that knowledge is of no value. This is the program I was talking about. We started Asia's first postgraduate program in data science, business analytics, and big data in association with IBM. Today, we are the largest institution for offering full-time program. We have campus in Bombay, Pune, and Bangalore. Ritin will be talking more about that. Looking at the uncertainty, whether the academic institution will be able to open or not, and we really realize the fact that maybe we'll not be able to open our campus in September. So we launch online full-time. This is the world's first online full-time postgraduate program, which will run just like a full-time program for 5 days, morning to evening classes. And you can really gain the knowledge sitting right at your home with best of the technology. You will have the online lab. You'll be doing projects on facial recognition, chatbots. You'll analyze data, right? So this program is a unique in its kind. And we have launched this program. This program will start in September. We've also launched world's first postgraduate program in a live interactive model. These are not recorded sessions just like Coursera or Udemy. These are live interactive sessions wherein you can really speak to the faculty, and there we'll be using our technology. We have very robust learning management system, examination system, all those stuff. And this is again in association with IBM, and this we run on our campus as well. But seeing this COVID situation, we thought of offering it online. This is powered by very strong technology base of Immuni. We have also launched online cybersecurity full-time program. Likewise, we are launching full-time cloud computing program in association with IBM, and full stack development. So these are the 5 programs we are launching: cloud computing, data science, AI, full stack. These are the programs which will be launching in online mode, full-time in a live interactive mode, not recorded sessions. And anyway, these programs we run are on our campus. Let's see what are the opportunities. These are the merely numbers. You can really find these statistics. This doesn't mean anything. What it means that there are huge number of opportunities are there in this area. And now if we look at the COVID-19, companies are looking at some solution through which they can really automate things. And AI is one of the important technology. Data science is one of the important stack of solutions which can really bring intelligent automation. So you have a RPA for automation, but AI and data science can really bring intelligence in that. It can really make systems much scalable. And one of the most important statement which you can really go through, this is 80% of all the applications will have AI component by 2020. And this statement is made by IDC. All the world leaders, they refer the IDC research. This is very powerful analysis. This is very powerful research. And all of us, we can really see when you search for any kind of, say, if you're searching for Rihanna song or Michael Jackson song on YouTube, it will start showing you the Rihanna song rather than showing you Anuj Jaluta's bhajan. And what it tells that this software, YouTube is merely a piece of software. but this software has become a very intelligent, just like your mother. So if you don't like, say, a dosa, your mother, even without you opening your mouth, mother will know that what dish perhaps you will like, whether you like idli or you will like aloo paratha, right? So these intelligence which we are imparting, these intelligence and software will come essentially from data science, AI, machine learning, natural language processing, which I will be talking more about that. Uh, during this COVID, I know that companies are hiring during this COVID. Companies are coming for a campus and they are hiring our students. They are offering internship. They are offering them the full-time job as well. So those who are good, those who know the skill, those who can build product, those who can really analyze, those who can build softwares, you don't have to really worry about. Enough job opportunities are there. Only people, those who will have a trouble, those who have merely a knowledgeable, but they cannot demonstrate. They have not done the projects. Now, this is again a very significant research which was done by, say, EY, FICCI, and what this research says that roughly around 9% of the existing job roles will vanish in next 2 years. Do you have to believe that? Roughly in India, close to almost 600 million people work, which is combined Canada, America, Russia's population, and UK's population. This is the large number of people in India work. Out of 600 million people, you take say 10%, which is roughly around 60 million people will their job roles will significantly will change. And you don't have to wait for 2 years. Already we are seeing data scientist job was non-existent, say 5-6 years back. NLP engineer was non-existent. Alexa skill engineer was non-existent. So you have seen in last 5 years, there are so many jobs which is coming, which will not there. And this has always happened in technology, but the pace of change has become exponentially, and that's a challenge. That's a huge challenge for all the faculty members, all the students. And Professor Srinivas, optical fiber engineer, and but last, and I really admire your spirit at 60 years age. You're learning statistics and other stuff. And then last 6-7 years, I have started learning data science, AI, machine learning. Quite away from the telecom, and I'm really enjoying. So the key is, as Darwin says, it's not the strongest who will survive, it's the one, those who will change themselves and change exponentially, not linearly, right? Of course, whatever the technology you have been taught in your colleges, they are very significant technology. They are the base, and I will be talking more on that. We have this data science delivered consulting, and we offer internship. I would like to invite researchers and students from JNTU, or even those who are attending, please join in the program. We have very significant work which we are doing. You can be part of that, and you can really gain experience if you know machine learning or TensorFlow or even Android development or iOS development. We hire internship, and you can really be, our researchers will mentor you, and you can be part of the significant projects. And some of the projects, skill job trends, job recommender system, big data, facial recognition, attendance. There are multiple projects. I will be talking about 2-3 projects before I actually start describing you what is data science. So one of the projects which is close to my heart, this is called Khojo. This we gave it free of cost to Government of Goa. And what this project does, our researchers build an app which is called Khojo app. So what it does, you take a photograph of any children begging on the street, and most likely he must have been abducted. In India, there are almost 1 lakh children goes missing every year, and they are forced into begging trade. Now, this project is to really stop that child trafficking and women trafficking. So you just take a photograph, upload it, and if their parents has launched a complaint somewhere from Ranchi or some remote place in Jharkhand, immediately alert will be sent to the police from where the complaint was launched, parents, NGO, and the local police station where the children was found. Very powerful project, and we are inviting the interns, researchers to really collaborate and work on that, on this social good area. And Professor Srinivas, he can also set up a data science or AI for social good, and we can really take significant work in this area. This project I spoke about, Corona Khojo, this is a further extension to really enforce home quarantine people. Another area of research we are doing is basically to find skill and job analysis. Let me show you the live stuff. This is very significant work which we have done. So I am showing you live. So this is the student portal where you can really see the learners analytics, what is the grades of the student, everything. And here in the placement section, if you click on the job, so one of the major problem which you will agree with me, Professor Srinivas, that most of the curriculum which is offered by universities and colleges, we have no clue whether they are meeting to the need of the industry or not. And the traditional way of designing curriculum is that we set up the committee which has got academicians and industry people, and higher the experience, higher the bias they bring in. So say for example, if in your in curriculum advisory committee, you have a person from X company or Y company, they will try to really introduce their products into the curriculum, which may or may not be very popular in the market. And that brings a lot of bias. For example, if somebody is PhD in computer science, they will say, okay, coding is only important. If somebody is coming from PhD in mathematics, they will say mathematics is the center of all data science. So that way, the curriculum becomes pretty biased. So what we have done, so although we have very strong curriculum advisory committee available with us, representative from IBM, AWS, and all top companies are there, Spectral. But what we have built a model, we have built a proprietary tool, which actually identifies the gap between the skill and the curriculum which you are offering and what skills the job market is looking at. And this is the demonstration of that product. So we design our curriculum based on product input. So this actually, if you see, analyze, this will tell you that in the cluster of data science, AI and machine learning, there are almost 24,000 jobs are available currently in India, right? It's not exact, but it is closer to the available jobs available. And the most important skill set is needed in this job is basically Python, which has got 18,000 jobs are there available. Second most important skill set is which is SQL, which is much higher than the Hadoop, right? So there are a lot of coaching classes. When I visited Hyderabad, I saw tons of coaching classes offering training for the Hadoop. But SQL is still more important than the Hadoop. The world is still works on the SQL, and SQL is being taught in every engineering college. So my recommendation to professors, those who are attending, and students, if next time if some industry person comes and tells that your university is teaching you all rubbish courses, tell them that, gentlemen, correct data and come up with the right data. Don't really speak up your mind. We are living in the data world. Linux, Unix is all taught in engineering colleges. They are very important, right? Machine learning. So the next important skill set is machine learning, which has got almost 5,893 jobs. And let's see where this machine learning skill is used, right? So this will give you analysis that machine learning is a skill used in data scientist, software engineer, AI, ML developer, software developer. So other than data scientists and AI, ML developers, software engineers and software developers are going to consume this machine learning, not in future, today. So even though the designation of software engineering is not changed, but the underlying skill is changed, because no more you will be building up a dumb software, rule-based software, you will be building intelligent software, just like Ola or Uber or Flipkart or maybe recommender system of Amazon. So every software engineer need to build a smart software. To give you example, this online testing examination, which this technology I built in 2002, and we used to do a campus recruitment for TCS, Capgemini, Hexaware in 2006. That time we were not using the facial recognition technology. But today, when we were offering for home proctoring, we needed to really bring in human intelligence so that we can really analyze the photographs of students at a scale, thousands of students. And so we needed to really make that old software as an intelligent software. So our software developers needed to really learn the ML and AI. So you don't have to really wait. So those who think that AI and ML and data science is a separate career path, let me give you caution. No, they are not. Right? So even if you want to spend your career in software development, you need to really learn these things. Of course, the level will vary. The another very important project which we are doing is basically job recommender system. So this entire system is deployed by government of Goa, and thousands of students are getting benefit out of that. So this job recommender system gives you the job recommendation based on the degree program you have enrolled. Maybe, for example, a mechanical engineer enrolled and did some courses on Coursera or Udemy or somewhere other places. Based on these new skills which he have acquired, this job recommender system will start giving him job recommendation which is related to Python developer rather than only mechanical engineering. And that reduces down the whole burden of training and placement officers. At the same time, the recruiter are able to really get the right kind of recommendation against the GD which they have posted. Now, this kind of research we are doing, and we are inviting scholars, research scholars, developers to really come and join internship. Now, let me go back again to my PPT. Okay, so I took a screenshot on my PPT, but I thought to show you a live demonstration, which will really make more sense. Now, having set up the context for this, I gave you some practical example of data science and AI. Let us try to really define what is AI in AI data science in next 10 minutes. What is AI? AI to me is more of a philosophy than the science and technology. And what was the philosophy? Philosophy of bringing machines closer to the human being. So in mid-90s, scientists thought about how about training machines so that they can really do tasks which are simple to human being. Which are simple to human being, recognizing alphabets, recognizing between cat and dog. And it took almost 70 years, still machine can really make mistake. But we have made significant progress in terms of a facial recognition, object detection, wherein machines have outperformed the accuracy level of human being. And even to the extent that machines have started creating artificial or fake images and fake videos. That's on the dark side of AI. So intelligence, so why we are talking about artificial intelligence? Because this is infusing the natural intelligence artificially into the machines. When I'm saying machine, these are the CPUs, right? And what forms intelligence? This is a very open subject, and still scientists are debating and trying to really contemplate what constitutes of intelligence. But we can broadly define that your ability to read, your ability to hear, your ability to solve problems, comprehend, these actually forms to your natural intelligence. And if you want to really transfer these abilities and intelligence to machine, this becomes artificial intelligence. So this is a philosophy of bringing machine closer to the human being. And how you accomplish? You accomplish with a stack of technology. AI is not a singular technology. AI is basically stack of technology. What are the stack of technology? Here is the sum of the stack of technology. One of the important technology to empower AI is basically machine learning. So machine learning helps machines to learn just like a human being. So how do you know that I'm wearing this jacket has a black color? It is not a white color because your mother has told. How do you know whether it is a cat or a dog? Because your mother or your parents has shown you cats and dogs, and you have subsequently have learned. Now machines also learn in this way. So if you want machines to predict whether it is a cat or a dog, white shirt or a black shirt, you show the images of cat and dog, hundreds of images, and machine will be able to tell you next image which you show whether it is a cat or a dog. And that you do with machine learning and deep learning. Right? Deep learning is the baby of machine learning, subset of machine learning. Now you want machines to learn the capability of reading text just like a human being. You impart this skill through the natural language processing. Say you, as I gave you the example, Watson can read 800 documents, 800 million documents per second. So doctors cannot really read these research papers, so machine can really learn and comprehend. Like Amazon can really read the reviews of millions of people on some product and can really tell you whether positive review or negative review, or whether these are the fake reviews. Amazon has blacklisted hundreds of fake reviewers based on ML and NLP techniques. Now you want to really give some power to machine to speak just like a human being, just like a Sophia or Alexa or a Pepper, and that you impart through the speech to text and text to speech technologies. Now you want machines to look at image or video and recognize the surrounding just like a human being do that. And God has given us a vision. And if you transfer this vision to computers, that is called computer vision. And we are using computer vision in our automatic proctoring, AI-based proctoring in our testing technology. We are using computer vision for identifying the missing children or a woman, right? So you want machine to learn to dance just like a human being. You impart this intelligence through robotics. Still, AI do not have couple of stuff which is touch sense, smell sense. And 6 months back, the researchers in Sweden, and she has actually developed the artificial intelligence, artificial skin, which can actually sense the touch. 2 weeks back, university in Singapore, also researchers have done some significant work on developing a artificial skin. So in future, we will see that machine will also have intelligence of touch and smell. So to sum up, AI is a philosophy of bringing machines closer to the human being, and how you achieve that with a stack of technologies. And current AI primarily relies more on machine learning and NLP. In next 5 minutes, I will tell you what machine learning is, what machine learning can really do. Machine learning, basically there are 2 definitions of machine learning for software engineer. It's a basically smart way of developing software wherein you don't have to keep on changing the code. And the software learns based on the data. Example is spam filter. So when you, in Gmail, so Google engineers do not keep on changing the software every day. They do not rewrite the code. The program learns based on the data, and it classifies whether it is a spam email or a normal email. The other definition is basically data scientist and data analyst and business analyst definition, which is through machine learning is a technique of data science through which you can really find the pattern, you can really predict the future. For example, you want to really predict how many patients Andhra Pradesh will be having in next, say, 2 months time, coronavirus patient. How many car Hyderabad will be having, say, on roads in next 5 years. What will be the stock price of Tech Mahindra, say, next Monday? Now, if you want to really find out these answers, which requires to really predict future, you analyze the past historical data, and based on that, you do the prediction. And you do it by applying machine learning. So 2 definitions, software engineer definition and data scientist definition. Now, machine learning can answer you 5 questions, and here are the 5 questions. Number 1 question, machine learning can really answer. By the way, machine learning can do infinite things, but it can really answer 4 or 5 or 6 questions. Number 1 question, it can really answer at a scale, how many, how much, kitna deti hai. So what will be the stock price? What will be the India's population? How many patients will be there, right? And you do it through supervised learning or regression. Regression techniques was in statistics was last 200 years, recently borrowed in the machine learning. And that proves the point of Dr. Srinivas that mathematics, statistics, probability is the foundation of data science. You need to really learn that. The other important question it can really answer, which is classification, which Dr. Srinivas was also talking about, whether it is a Shyam or a Ram. And that you can really do with tons of classification algorithms, which is there in machine learning. A real life example is whether you have a cancer or you don't have a cancer, whether you have COVID-19 or you don't have a COVID-19. This is a malaria or a viral. The third question it can really answer, how do you really organize? So if having 350 million customers data, you want to really organize, you'll apply customer segmentation. You will apply unsupervised learning segmentation. The next question it can really answer whether this behavior is abnormal or not behavior. The example is perhaps like you have a credit card, but you have never swiped credit card more than 5,000 rupees and you swipe 30,000. Immediately the bank realizes, machine learning algorithm realizes that this is the abnormal behavior, and the bank gives you the alert. Gentlemen, it is you who has done the transaction. So it is to identify the anomaly in human behavior. This also applies in cyber security to identify whether this abnormal traffic which is coming in your network, or some unauthorized person is trying to really access in your device or your system. The next is very critical. What should I do next? So, for example, you're likely to fail in examination in machine learning. What should you do? So our system can really advise you that what next steps you should really do. Or maybe in driverless car, if dog is crossing, whether car should stop or hit, right? If you're playing chess or a game Go, so reinforce these kind of machine learning algorithms called reinforcement learning algorithms. This is applied in gaming. This is applied in okay. Which are the tools for machine learning? R, Python, they are open source. MATLAB, which is proprietary. Apache Mouse, Spark, MLib, they are for doing the large scale of machine learning. Microsoft Azure ML, AWS ML, TensorFlow, they actually bring your machine learning algorithms. They also offer you a lot of pre-trained models. You can also take your trained models and just import the API and consume it in any app or a web app. So you don't have to really have very expert level of coding skills. With a normal Python, you can really do a wonderful and amazing products. Deep learning is a subset of machine learning. Deep learning is primarily used for data which has got images, videos, log files, data. The accuracy level is very high, but deep learning algorithms are like a black box. They have very complex mathematics, and it's extremely difficult for you to comprehend why it is giving answers so. So it is not advisable to apply deep learning everywhere. I know that it has become learn TensorFlow and just start with deep learning, but there are a lot of use cases where you will be starting with classical machine learning only. Let's talk about big data, because big data is fueling the whole revolution of AI, data science and machine learning, because you require data, and all these years you have been acquiring data and information, and that's what universities and colleges are doing, and that's what I am trying to really do in this meetup. So big data is coming from, say, sensors, mobile phones, YouTube, Facebook, data which is coming from internet, IoT devices. And what is happening, let's see, all these internet companies, they started way back in 95, mid 90s and late 90s. And they started seeing traction in early 2000. And they saw that if they have to really make money, when Google was started in 99, they had no idea how they will make money. So later on, these companies figured it out, including Facebook. If they have to really make money, they need to really offer a right advertisement to the right customer. And if I have to really offer the right advertisement, I need to really get the insight about the customer. And how I can really get insight about the customer, just like go back to your mother. You're collecting your data about you even before you were born. And that's the reason she has built such a strong intelligence and intuition about you. She can understand even without you opening your mouth. And likewise, now Facebook do not offer you any advertisement related to Mercedes-Benz or BMW, because Facebook knows that you cannot really buy, you're just studying in a college. And that example tells that why it is important to collect the data. So companies started collecting the data, but collecting data, the biggest problem is where you are going to really store. You have to really store this data in server. It costs a lot. So there is a smart gentleman, Doug Cutting. He was working on an open source project called Nudge, and he developed a Hadoop system. And Hadoop actually gives you flexibility. You can store any kind of data, whether it's structured, unstructured, images, text, video, and it is open source. So it is free of cost. And this he built in 2006, and that's how this whole revolution of big data started. So big data revolution is not like 30-year-old revolution. It's just hardly 15-year or 14-year-old revolution. And today, all companies, like whether it's Flipkart or BSC or HDFC Bank, they all are using it, including SBI. So we saw what is AI, what is data science, what is machine learning. Let's see in next 5 minutes what is data science. Data science is basically is a art, is a science of making sense out of the data. Very simple. My definition of data science is basically data science is a combination of artificial intelligence techniques, machine learning, deep learning, to analyze the large volume of the data, because the data has got the variety of the data. It has got the images. To analyze image, you will use computer vision. To analyze text, you will use NLP and traditional analytics. So this is a combination of all these three things. It is a much evolved form of traditional analytics. Data science is also about automating the data science. And let's understand by a simple example. So when you really go on Flipkart or Snapdeal, If you search for a shirt of white, it gives you white shirt recommendation rather than pink. So this is basically outcome of analysis, but they have automated this analysis, which is called recommender system. 1/3 of the revenue of Snapdeal, Flipkart, and Amazon comes out of these recommender systems. It's built by half a dozen to a dozen data scientists, and that tells you why data scientists are paying so heavily, right? So a data scientist with 5 years experience draws roughly around 35 lakh to 40 lakh rupees, right? A data scientist with 10 years experience, which is very hard to really find, they draw something around 350K to 400K, right? And that's the situation. Even a fresh graduates make something around 8 lakh to 15 lakh rupees right here in India. What are the skill sets you require to become a data scientist? You need to have the domain knowledge. You need to know math, statistic, probability. You need to know machine learning in terms of IT tools, which is R, Python, Hadoop, Spark, ML over Azure. Where it is being applied, it's applied in manufacturing, telecom, e-commerce, social media, banking, healthcare, in almost every industry. Data science versus AI. I saw a lot of students, they ask questions on Quora. They are not versus, they are not against. AI, data science uses a lot of AI techniques, which is machine learning, deep learning, NLP to analyze the data, which I spoke earlier. So they are not together, but data science is the art of the data, and it uses various AI techniques. This picture actually tells you the difference between business analyst, data analyst, and data scientist. The data scientist, which is much more evolved form of data analyst, business analyst. What skills you require: statistic, probability, natural language processing, R, machine learning, Python, Spark, Hadoop. These are the skill sets which you require to become a good data scientist, right? There are tons of other skill sets which I will skip. Just another 2 minutes, Dr. Kulkarni. I will be wrapping up in 2 minutes. So how do you enter into this field? Join a blog on datasciencegyan.com. You can also join a group, Data Science Gyan, on Facebook, wherein we do a lot of posting. You can also attend a lot of meetups. Do it on every Saturday and Sunday. And you can join, subscribe to a television, Aegis TV. On YouTube, take a snapshot of this white papers and search for the white papers on Google. Data science white paper by Aegis and Deloitte, big data white paper by Deloitte and Aegis, and NLG white paper. How do you enter into this field? Pick up short courses. You can explore our program, PGP in data science, business analytics, and big data in association with IBM, which we are offering online now. You can also explore a course by IIT Kharagpur, IIM Kolkata, ISI. And I'm glad that JNT University is also starting some programs in this area. Globally, you can think of MS by New York University or MS in data science by Berkeley. They're very good. Those who know Python, R, machine learning, TensorFlow, you can apply for internship at the R Consulting, Data Science Delivered. Those who have done PhD or Masters, you can apply for as a research scholar. We are hiring currently. Thank you so much. These are my coordinates. I would love to connect with you. You can write me, you can follow me in LinkedIn. I am bad at responding to email, but whenever I get time, I would be happy to really respond it to you. If you want to really go for internship, please get in touch with Ritin and Nimit. Ritin, Nimit, kindly write down your coordinates on this chat box, and please approach them, and our team will interview you and hire you as an intern. Thank you so much. And I welcome Professor Vinay Kulkarni. He's our director. He's adjunct faculty IIT Bombay. He's BTech, MTech, PhD from IIT Bombay. Yeah, mentor and faculty for Hadoop, Spark, machine learning, and he mentors you on various projects. He spent several years in the software industry. He was a vice president with Geometric Solutions, so he has deployed multi-million-dollar industry-grade software. So welcome to you, Dr. Kulkarni, and sorry that I exceeded by 3 minutes.
Oh, no problem, Bhupesh. Thank you so much for introducing me. Let me begin by greeting Professor Srinivas Kumar, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Dr. Deva Kumar, Director of Management College, Dr. Varalakshmi and Dr. Zakir Hussain, and all the participants who are attending this particular seminar or meetup, whatever you want to call it. Very good afternoon. I think you've got a lot of inputs already from Bhupesh. He has painted a very broad canvas. So what I will do is I will focus on some specific aspects. Maybe you can call it a slightly deeper dive into specific aspects of data and why data is right now occupying this vantage position. Let me first share my screen. I hope I am audible. Bhupesh, can you just confirm once?
Yes, we can hear you, sir.
Yes, sir, you're audible, sir. You're audible.
Yeah. So, the gist of my talk is going to be around data, and we would like to call data as something. Some people call it as the new oil. I have termed this talk as data the new gold. Essentially, you can call data the new diamond. Whatever is valuable, you can append it to the word data, and that is what data is these days, right? So let us focus on calling it as data the new gold, basically to give it the importance that it is deserving right now. And let us try and understand what has happened in the past related to data and machine learning and AI, and how things are different right now and why so. Okay. So if you look back at this discipline of artificial intelligence or machine learning, although we feel that this subject is new and it is making names and it is making waves and so many applications are getting developed and becoming very prominent and useful, actually the foundation to these topics were laid long back in the mid 1950s, actually, in institutions like MIT and so on. And it's not a surprise that the foundation is based on mathematics, right? So all the techniques behind what we call as machine learning today got developed quite long back. And it's almost now 70 years or 75 years since the techniques have got developed. But it is worth thinking about, why is it that only now, these techniques have become so popular? It's not that the techniques are very new. Well, if you go back to 1950s, the mathematics was all there, the concepts was there, even terms like artificial neural networks, you can find in literature way back, right? But what was missing, the one important thing that is required in in this field is availability of data, right? And if you go back to 1950s, data was something which was very scarce. How would you get data? Basically, these techniques which have got developed, they require huge amount of data so that data can then be processed and patterns and trends and insights can be extracted from it, which means you need huge amount of data. And way back in 1950s, you had to make great efforts to get even a little amount of data. You had to employ basic statistical sampling techniques. It was cumbersome, to say the least, right? But what is the situation now? In the last 10, 15, 20 years, and I have some interesting graphs to show you very shortly, we have huge amount of data getting created, okay? And right now the situation is, whether you like it or not, data is getting created. Now it is up to you to decide what you want to do with the data, okay? So mathematics pre-existed, data started getting developed in the last 20 years or so. So you naturally bring these things together, and suddenly the field of artificial intelligence and machine learning becomes very popular, and applications are now possible. And what is the reason? The reason is something that we are going to see in the next couple of slides. So right at this moment, as the slide says, people, devices, hardware, software are throwing out data, right, that has relevance to some business process, some personal or professional decision making, or some public safety issue, or some personal safety issues also, or personal health issues also, right? So there are so many of these actors, if you can call it that, that are throwing out data. So these days we don't have to do anything. We all carry this device called as a cell phone with us. And in the background, the cell phone does a lot of things. It knows where we are, it knows whether we are moving. Okay, and this data is getting exchanged with powerful servers in the background. And these servers have access to huge amount of data. Okay. So right now the situation is we are creating huge amounts of data, and in the last 20 years we have fundamentally changed the way data is treated. Okay, we create more of each day, and it is not a waste product but a buried treasure waiting to be discovered by curious, motivated researchers and practitioners who see the trends that are hidden in the data and are reaching out to meet the current challenges. So many of these statements will become clear as we go along. But what is key here is that all this has been happening in the last 20 years. So let us take a look at some graphs. Okay. So this gives you the total amount of data that has flown or is flowing through the internet pipes over the period from, let us say, 1990 to what is happening currently, right? So this is the total internet traffic that is flowing in. And obviously, as you can see, since about early 2000s, the rate at which this data is getting generated has been increasing. Okay, who are the creators of this data? It's not companies, it's not the government, but it is people like you and me, because now we have access to the internet, we have access to applications, and we can generate data, typically audio, video, text, messages, likes, status updates, so many things we create, right? And all this is flowing through the internet. And the graph that you are seeing in front of you is nothing but a reflection of that. But if you think a little bit, long back, the nature of data was like this. It was like a coconut. If you break open a coconut, what are the qualities that you see? First of all, unless you break open the coconut, you don't see what is inside, right? So you open or break open a coconut only when you want to use the contents of the coconut. Okay. And you have absolute prior knowledge of the content. Right? You break open a coconut, either you expect water, or at least the malai inside the coconut, and it is extremely predictable. The contents of this is extremely predictable, and so was the case of data long time back. Okay, and hence it was manageable, right? Since the data was predictable and the quantity of data was less, it was manageable. Now the question is, who used to create the data long time back? Okay. If you think about it, it was not actors like you and me who were creating this data, but primarily businesses, companies, let us say institutions like the railways, the airlines, businesses who used to seek data for specific purposes. Like the railways used to ask you data related to your age, place of travel, date of travel, who all are traveling. Okay, now this is all predictable. This is all manageable, and the railways exactly know how many trains they are running on a typical day, how many seats or berths there are in the trains. Okay, so the overall size of the data is absolutely known. So that was the nature of data long time back. Okay, now fast forward to the current times. This is how data is looking right now. So what are the qualities of the data that we are seeing flowing through the internet right now? Now it is something that flows continuously. You don't have to break open anything like the coconut. Whether you like it or not, this data is getting generated. You have no control as an individual or as a company or even as a government. You have no control. You absolutely have no prior knowledge of the content, right? It can be anything. It can be a khichdi or a mixture of so many things. And I have been referring to messages and status updates and audios and videos and blogs and tweets, so many things, right? So you never know what kind of data will be generated by whom at what point in time, and it just keeps on flowing. So that is where the unpredictability lies. And seemingly this data is unmanageable, right? So like you see the water gushing out of this particular dam, perhaps there were heavy rains and they had to release a huge amount of water, right? So that is the nature of the data today. It flows continuously, no prior knowledge, it is unpredictable and seemingly unmanageable, right? So if you look at this, the difference then and now is in terms of first volume, the amount of data that is getting generated. The volume now is really huge. Velocity is the rate at which data is getting generated. So if you go back to prior to 2000, the rate of data generation was hardly anything. It was absolutely manageable. It was like a smooth, small stream flowing continuously, maybe a trickle. But look at the situation right now. The data is getting generated at huge velocity. And the third point is variety. Okay, I think Bhupesh mentioned about these three aspects. So what do we mean by variety? Again, there is no predictability of what kind of data. We may have simple things like Excel sheets floating around, which is what we would call as structured data, or we could have unstructured data, which is blogs, tweets, audio, video, and all of that, right? So these are the three characteristics of the data today, and all this put together is what we call as big data. Okay. So if you look at companies like Google, Microsoft, Amazon, or our own Flipkart or Ola, Uber, these new age companies, why do they even exist? They exist because of this, or they exist with this as the foundation, because they have access to huge amounts of data. And this access is then converted to business offerings, business propositions, into profits, so on and so forth, right? So the long and short of it is that the data that is getting generated now is hiding a lot of very important and critical information. Okay, and the key thing is to convert this untamed flow of data into specific insights, whether it is for business purpose or whether it is for personal gains, right? So we do have access to big data today, and it is up to us to make use of it, right? So to summarize, the nature of modern data is it is largely unstructured. So almost 100% of the data that is getting generated today is unstructured. So the simple way of comparing unstructured and structured data is Excel sheets or databases are examples of structured data, and audio, video, blogs, tweets, these are examples of unstructured data. The data set is very large, dynamic and rapidly increasing. So that is the volume and the velocity. The most important thing is it is highly dispersed, and data is getting generated in a distributed manner, right? And because of this, it is actually required to process the data also in a distributed manner. So here is one thing. Even if you want to collect all the data that is generated throughout the world today and bring it to one central location so that you could process it, it is not possible. Physics will not allow you to do that, because there are figures which prove that the data that is generated in a single day, if you want to collect all that and bring to one particular location, it will take a few years. Why? Because data can only be transmitted at the maximum rate, which is governed by the speed of light. Okay, even if you use optic fibers. So that is the limiting factor. So transfer of data cannot be unlimited. It is limited by these conditions. So we have no choice today. We have to look at distributed data storage, and we have to look at distributed data processing, right? And why do we want to do this? Because of the reason that I just told you, that this data holds huge amount of information and insights, which we would like to use for professional reasons as well as for personal reasons. So it is extremely critical to process data and generate the results real time, right? As things are happening, as the data is getting generated, we would like to process it, and then we would like to make use of it. Okay. So here are the questions we need to ask ourselves, and we need to find answers to all this. Where do we want to store it? How do we want to process it? How do we want to query it, right? And I can only emphasize that the age-old methods of storing data in relational database management systems, like for instance, Oracle or MS SQL or MySQL, they are no longer sufficient. They are no longer adequate to handle the kind of data that we are talking about here, right? So we have to store and process data in different ways. And I have a graphic coming up which shows you how data is stored now. But what is important is we will be using huge amount of hardware. Okay, so we obviously have to look for inexpensive hardware. We have to also give a thought to how to make all this scalable. As we move along, more and more data will be getting generated. So where do we store all this? Do we really delete the old data? By the way, Google never deletes any data. Okay, whatever data is getting created, ever since Google came into existence, that data is available to them on their servers. So you can imagine the amount of hardware that they use to store the data. Okay, then of course there is this matter of cost, how to do all this with reasonable cost and how to make it fault tolerant so that data is not lost. So this is what I was talking about. So left side is the old situation and the right side is a new situation, right? Left side, predictable data, right side, unpredictable, huge volume, huge velocity. So the earlier data was stored on devices like, let us say the floppy disks, hard drives, and that obviously is inadequate now. So now you have on the right side, data getting stored in what we call as data centers. So as you see a graphic of a data center, which is nothing like a huge library, except that instead of books, you have computer cards here. Of course, you don't see keyboard and monitor, that is not required. But these are the equivalents of, let us say, motherboards, stacks and stacks of computer boards, which are actually functional computers. They are housed inside the data centers, and you will find data centers located all over the planet, in all major cities, in all major countries, right? So data is getting generated and it is stored. And the last segment is on the left side, you have structured data, which was very well organized earlier. And right now the situation is you have multitude of applications and devices and processes which generate both structured and, most importantly, huge amount of unstructured data, right? So what do you do with all this? So obviously the first step is to contain this, if you can call it uncontrollable flow of data. So you would like to, obviously, it's like building a dam on a very swiftly flowing river, right? You need a strong dam to build so that it can hold all the water. So similarly here, you need a system which will focus on containing the data. You don't want to delete any data, but as time goes by, the data keeps on increasing. So you have this tool called as Apache Hadoop, which again Bhupesh mentioned in his talk, which is a tool which has got developed in the last, let us say, 12 to 13 years to be able to store the data, right? Now, once you store the data, what do you do with it? You want to then churn the data. You want to churn the data so that you can extract gems of insights, gems of information, and use these gems for predicting what is going to happen and make our systems and procedures more intelligent and so on. So obviously you need tools for churning the data, and that is where once you store the data using Apache Hadoop, one of the tools that is used for churning the data and getting insights out of that data is a tool called as Spark. Now, this is one of the tools. There are a couple of others available, but this is one of the more popular tools that is used. So what is the role of Spark? Take the data that is there and then submit it to various analytics and machine learning algorithms to extract this gem of information from the data that is available in the data store, right? So this is how it is done. Now, where is data making a difference? right? There are a lot of applications, but I think before we go there, I would like to focus a little bit on this churning process. Okay, so let me shift my screen to try and explain to you how is this churning kind of done. Okay, so what we need to understand, finally, it is all mathematics, right? So here we have something called as, let us say, an equation of this particular nature. Y is equal to fx. You know, Bhupesh talked about classification and regression. So let us see what all these terms mean. So let us take a simple example. So I have a photograph here. Okay, I have a photograph here. And what is a photograph? Photograph is nothing but made out of pixels like this. And depending on the size of the photograph, there could be hundreds or thousands or millions of these pixels. Okay, and let us say I have a person, right? So the nature of the photograph is such that some of these pixels are dark and some of these pixels are white or bright, depending on where this person is located, right? So let me call this pixel as x1. Let me call this pixel as x2. Okay. So similarly, this one becomes x3. And I will want to call this last pixel as, let us say, xn. Okay. And let us say this person's name is, let me take my own name. I call this person Vinay, right? So I want to be able to establish an equation like this, that Vinay actually is represented by a function of x1, x2, x3, say right up to xn, right? So what do we know here? We know this, right? We know the value of all the pixels, and we know finally what these pixels represent, right? So this combination of pixels x1 to xn represents somebody called as Vinay. So what is the unknown over here? The unknown over here is this function. Okay. So if I were to expand this expression y is equal to fx, I can write it as y is equal to, let us say, beta 0 plus beta 1 times x1 plus beta 2 times x2 plus beta 3 times x3. Now, by the way, I'm overly simplifying things so that I can explain it more clearly. Beta n times xn, right? And now I have actually hundreds of photographs of this person called Vinay available with me. Okay, and you can imagine, tools like Facebook or let us say photos.google.com, which have multiple such photographs of a person available to them, right? So each of these photographs then contain their own x1, x2, up to xn, and so on. So using all of this information, using all the photographs that are available, what we would like to do is find out specific values for these beta 0, beta 1, beta 2, up to beta n. Okay. And this process of trying to find out all of these betas based on the available information, that is x1, x2, x3, xn, as well as y, this is nothing but what you would call as machine learning, right? So mathematically, this is what it is. Let us take another use case. For instance, let us say we are wanting to use data for marketing purpose or advertisement purpose. Okay, and based on different regions of the country, we have certain data available to us, right? Where you say that, okay, in Bombay, if you have spent so much on advertisement, so much have been the sales. In Pune, you have spent so much on advertisement and so much are the sales, and so on. And if you plot all this, maybe you will get a graph of this particular nature, right? Now, what would we like to do? What is machine learning in this context? So machine learning in this context is actually saying that I want to find out a line, which more or less establishes the relationship or trend between, let us say, advertisement and sales. Okay. Now we all know what is the equation of this line. It's of the form of y is equal to mx plus c, right? So if I were to rewrite this, I can rewrite it as y is equal to beta 0 plus beta 1 times x, or in this particular case, you can say sales is equal to beta 0 plus beta 1 times advertisement expenditure, right? So again, this comes back to the form y is equal to f of x, right? So what is machine learning in this case? Using all of these dots that are available, how to find out the equation of this line in the form of y is equal to beta 0 plus beta 1 times advertisement, so that if I know, or if I do some kind of what if analysis, that if I spend so much on advertisement, what is likely to be the sale? You know, this model, so an ML model, now this is the linear regression model, it can predict, or it can tell me approximately, if you spend so much on advertisement, your sales are going to be of this level, right? Now here we are trying to classify the photograph into somebody, and here we are trying to predict the sales, right? So this is regression, and this is classification. Okay, and there are so many techniques in machine learning to be able to solve these classes of problems, right? So going back to this, so where is all this process making a difference, right? We can do classification, we can do clustering. Finally, all this is used to solve some real world problems. Okay, why are customers leaving us? Who are the important customers? Okay, how do we find out the least expensive route if I want to go from point A to point B? Okay, how do I program robots without writing a single line of code, by just providing it a camera, which basically means we provide vision to the robots? Okay, how do I classify and cluster customers? How do I know that some set of people will browse and never buy anything from the e-marketplace, and there are some set of customers who will buy after spending some little bit time browsing through various products? How do I classify them, right? How do I detect frauds, anomalies from, how do I prevent anomalies from happening, or frauds from happening? How do I detect an anomaly when it happens? Okay, how do I know that somebody is trying to compromise our security system? Okay, all of these problems finally can be solved with the availability of data based on the techniques that I have just described to you, right? On the shop floor, based on the machines and the sensors that they have, temperature sensor, vibration sensor, flow sensors, and so many sensors, how can we predict that the machines are likely to break down, okay, and interrupt the manufacturing process? How do we predict in advance so that we don't unnecessarily take the machines offline, but take them offline only when required? How do we use all this data to improve product quality? How do we help it to make decisions, make or buy decisions, right? So once data is available, all of these questions can be answered, or predictions can be made using these machine learning techniques. Now, this particular slide is trying to tell you that perhaps there is no field at this point in time which is untouched by applications related to data. And data is available in almost all the fields. Let us take medical. Right? If you go to any hospital today, you will find a monitor which is fixed above the patient's bed, and a couple of wires connected to the patient, and constantly you will see some graph, data acquisition going on. So there is huge amount of data getting generated. X-rays are taken. So there are systems which can go through the X-ray and tell you if there is a problem. Is this lung X-ray indicative of any lung disease? Or this X-ray related to let us say the bone, does it indicate that there is a fracture? All of these questions can now be fairly automatically answered. Okay, so the point here is whether you take the field of medical science, remote sensing, geographical information systems, environment modeling, agriculture, web traffic prediction, image processing, engineering, speech processing, and many more. I mean, the list is endless, right? Where data is available, data can help make decisions, and where these techniques of machine learning can be applied. Okay. So these are the challenges and steps. How and where to store all the data, how to extract structure from unstructured data, how to detect patterns and trends, create models, how to effectively use the trends and patterns, and how to dynamically adapt the model. So the first box is what you would call the headache of the data engineer, right? So use of Hadoop or any equivalent system to store data and to present the data in the required format for further analysis is what a data engineer would do. But second box onwards, how to extract structure from unstructured data, how to detect trends and patterns, So this is a mix of responsibility of data engineer, data scientist, data analyst, right? So availability of data has created all these opportunities and posts for use of data for useful purposes. Okay. So in summary, here is what we have covered so far. Since the last 20 years or so, we have been creating a very large amount of data, primarily unstructured data, which contains hidden information, which is valuable to individuals and businesses. And consequently, we have created techniques to store and manage the data and also to extract information, useful information from the data. And machine learning is one of the techniques, and one of the class of techniques, let me put it that way, because machine learning itself consists of tens of techniques, broadly classified as supervised and unsupervised learning. I described to you two of the supervised learning methods, which is regression and classification. And it is this that is foreseen to have. And, like Bhupesh told you, machine learning is a part of artificial intelligence, and the two together are foreseen to have far-reaching implications in the future. And hence, it is actually very important for everyone to understand the role that data is playing in our current way of living and the important applications that it can support, and be aware of the techniques and get oneself trained in it. So this is the future, right? So I would like to stop here, and if you have any few questions, maybe we can take a few questions right now. Nitin, would you like to moderate the questions?
Certainly. So I've already typed it over the chat box. So I would request the individuals if they have any questions. Okay, so Rajkumar is asking,
Yeah.
so can you give example of unsupervised learning? Any example?
Okay, I think the best example, concrete example of unsupervised learning, if you go to sites like news.google.com, news.google.com, what they do is they constantly scan the various sources of news items, like Indian Express, Times of India, Hindu, New York Times, and all that. And they automatically group together news items which are related to a specific topic or event. Okay. So here, the mathematically, I told you machine learning is y is equal to fx, right? Where y in our case was like sales or the name of the person. And we call that as supervised learning because there is a y for every collection of x. Whereas in unsupervised learning, there is no y available. Based only on the x's, you have to group together, the points, various points, right? So if you go to news.google.com, that's a very good example of how just based on the contents of the news items, they are able to find similarity between the news items. So there is no y in the y equal to fx. It is just based on the x, you have to create the groupings. Okay, so that is unsupervised learning.
So another question is coming from Dhanashri Kolekar.
Yeah.
So she's asking, we have to learn. So she's quite inquisitive about that. So whether she has to learn all these things that we have explained, like machine learning, DL, AI, and Python, if somebody wants to excel into that area.
Well, it is like this, if you want to get an engineering degree, there are certain things that you have to learn, right? Okay. So just similarly, if you want to become a doctor, you have to learn certain things. So similarly, if you want to call yourself as data scientist, first you need to understand the fundamentals, which is where mathematics, particularly linear algebra and statistics, those are the foundation. Based on that, you have to understand the machine learning techniques, and you need to learn tools which will help you to practically implement all this, which is nothing but let us say languages and libraries provided by tools like Python. Okay, but if you think about it, it's not difficult, it's not intimidating. Yes, it takes time, and it's just like any other course or a degree that you do. You have to learn a few minimum set of things. Okay. Now, do you have to understand AI and all that? Well, not absolutely necessary. Machine learning, like we told you, is a part of artificial intelligence. It's a very small part of artificial intelligence. So it has its own applications. Okay. So one can keep ML as the first goal. And then if required, you can jump into artificial intelligence.
Another question Anand is asking. So he's asking, sir, is there any role of ANN, I believe artificial neural networks, in deep learning and machine learning both? Then how? How artificial neural networks, ANN, performs operations?
Okay. So who was this?
Anand Prabhakaran.
Okay. Anand, you just remember that expression which I gave, right? Y is equal to fx. Okay. What is linear regression? It is one method of finding out the f function. Okay. What is logistic regression? It is another method to find out the function. What is artificial neural network? It is another method to find out the f. So they are all different techniques to find out those beta values, which I was trying to show you, right? So it is one of those methods. Now, artificial neural networks are more flexible and they need huge amount of data to be able to find out those the function. And deep learning is nothing but multiple layers. So it is, it's like order of magnitude more flexible than artificial neural network. And consequently, it needs millions of data items to work on. I'm talking about deep learning network, right? So artificial neural network is a smaller deep learning network, which is manageable and which has been in existence for quite some time. But just understand that whether it is ANN or deep learning, they require much, much more data than the conventional machine learning techniques. But finally, it is what it is, finding out y is equal to fx.
Okay, so great. Another question I'll take from Shreya Gupta. So Shreya is asking, what tools are great to become a business analyst, whether it is SQL, Power BI, or Excel? Anything else is there? So she is looking forward any suggestions on that part.
Well, there's nothing like a great tool. I would only say there are appropriate tools. Okay, and it depends on the size of the data you are handling. Okay, so let us take a simple tool like Excel. Does it support machine learning? By the way, it implements linear regression and logistic regression and a couple of other techniques in the data analysis pack, right? So if your data size is of the order of, let us say, a few hundreds or thousands, then the simplest thing is to do your analysis using Excel. Okay, but if your data is unstructured and the data size is really very large, like Facebook handles images or Google handles emails and so many unstructured data types, then obviously you will need tools like Hadoop and Spark to be able to process the data. Okay, so really there is no single answer to your question about the best tool. It all depends on the kind of data you are handling and the volume of data you are handling. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. So another question we can take that is coming from, okay. So Anand Prabhakar is again asking how machine learning libraries processes unstructured and unlabeled data sets.
Okay, Anand, right?
Anand, yes.
Anand, if I could answer that in 10 seconds, I would. Okay. So that requires understanding of the mathematics behind it. So, I don't think I'll be able to answer you satisfactorily within this, short time frame that is given to you. But yes, the only thing that I can say is that both these are based on mathematics, and typically it is as simple as finding out distances between points. Okay, finally that is what it comes down to, right? The rest is all complexity of mathematics.
Okay, we'll take another question from Krishna. So Krishna is asking a bit different question regarding the roles of data scientist. He is quite inquisitive for. So he's asking, rather than just creating models and deploying, what actually is the use of data science? What all things he should be aware while creating the model? So he's trying to understand the complete process what data scientists they do.
Right. I think it's a very pertinent and important question. See, it is like this. Now, the role of data scientist is very critical, and it doesn't end at understanding mathematics or machine learning techniques, because finally, you are not doing machine learning for machine learning sake, or you are not doing AI for AI sake. You are doing all this to solve specific problems, right? So let us say in a business context, you want to apply these techniques to solve some specific problems, and you would do that for customers. And to be able to do that, you need to understand the nature of their problem. More often than not, the customers are unable to vocalize what they want, so you have to probe. So it's not just mathematics and knowing these techniques for programming, but being able to communicate well, converse well with the potential customers, understand their needs and requirements, building up an architecture of a solution for them, and ensuring that it goes through with the right quality. All this in some sense is the responsibility of the data scientist. Okay, the data scientist may not necessarily sit down and write code at a certain stage, but definitely the person has to understand what is involved in creating solution, and most importantly should be able to understand the language that the customer is speaking.
Another question, I'll take question on a similar note. Somehow other is coming up. Almost we have 90 individuals are joining in. So now Mohammed is asking some different questions. Are machine learning and AI will become the main reason for unemployment in future? Mohammed is asking that.
Okay, Mohammed, as a civilization, we have been making progress, right? We have at no point in time have we been stagnant. Okay, the same question could have been asked in the 1800s when factories came up and machines came up, and people who were doing things by hand, suddenly the same thing started happening, using machines. Okay, so would your answer be that the Industrial Revolution took away jobs, or did it create jobs? You answer that question and then you automatically have answer to your own question in this particular context.
Okay, and another question that is, so he's asking, Arun is asking, he wants to know, Arun is the name of the gentleman, and he's asking, what is the, how data science can be useful for the professionals who are working in the power utilities?
Who what?
How data science
can
be useful for professionals who are working in power utilities? Arun is asking that.
Okay, Arun, a very interesting question, because I encountered this problem in a very practical situation only a few weeks back. You take any field, and particularly let us say power, you have so many equipment involved in generating power, right? You have the generators, the transformers, the inverters, the distribution network, so on and so forth. And at every point in time, these equipment today, they are capable of measuring themselves and giving you the information using various sensors. And this data can, over a period of time, indicate the health of the entire system. Okay, and it can also detect, if you use the data and process it and create these ML models, you will develop the capability to detect and take action on anomalies, if any, that are happening, which obviously will prevent drastic breakdowns in any kind of system, right? So the same is also applicable to power. So, equipments generate data, data can be used to predict trends, and trends can be used to prevent, unforeseen happenings and improve performance and optimize. There are so many applications here.
I believe Arun, you got the answer of your question. And another question, a lot of questions, the same row that we are getting. So I will summarize that question. So I will not take everybody's question. I will summarize that way. So somebody could be the individuals are very much keen to know the whether it is very much compulsory for everybody to join any master's program for if somebody wants to do a transition into that data science vertical, what are the baby steps one can take if somebody's at the home, how they can, though I will be taking the another takeaway session, I will be covering up certain stuff.
Right.
Yes. So
Yeah.
but if you can give some expert comment on that, sir, so that would be great. So if is it compulsory for somebody to do any higher studies or anything, or what are the pros for doing that?
There are 2 points here. I don't know who asked that question. So there are 2 points here. One is, with the internet and open courses available, a lot of this information is obviously definitely available, and one can go for that. But the observation is, the traditional need for a guru or a teacher, or when I say teacher, I'm talking more about a learning environment or a teaching environment, which takes your hand and helps you walk through the whole process in a structured manner, in a time-bound manner, actually helps you to inculcate a certain kind of discipline which allows you to achieve your learning in a given period of time. Okay. So all these things are coming together, and that is where most people find the benefit of joining some course and going through the process. In fact, many people who join institutions like Aegis, for instance, since they have access to all these online courses, many of them actually already do these online courses and then prefer to join the institution, right? So, our understanding is, and based on our own personal experience, is that going through the whole thing in a structured manner is definitely more beneficial. If you can, do things in a very systematic way, and you're not bothered about getting a certificate in the end, then of course but discipline is important. Discipline and rigor is important. If you want to finish something in, let us say, 10 months or 11 months or 1 year, yes, both options are available to you. Join an institution or do it yourself. And there are certain benefits to joining an institution, but nothing which prevents you from doing it yourself. It all depends on your discipline.
Okay, so one technical question is coming from Anand already. So Anand is asking again, so he has asked 3 questions which we have answered already. So he's asking, sir, I have heard of our language has more space, memory space for calculation purpose in comparison to Python. Which language would you like to suggest for practicing data science? And can you please suggest any IDE framework, any other Google Colab that have the essential data science libraries? This is the comparison.
A very difficult question to answer, primarily because beyond a certain point, the tools don't matter. You will really use a tool based on the platform on which it is available, the amount of data that you will be crunching, right? So let me take the example of Spark, which I mentioned. Okay, now Spark is a new age tool, and it provides support both for R programming environment as well as Python programming environment. Okay, so it really does not matter, right? And if you acquire basic programming skills, really shifting from one programming language to another language is no big deal. Okay, so start with whatever is comfortable. Most people prefer Python because of the kind of libraries that it supports out of the box. And if you learn it, then you can use all of these libraries to do a lot of good things, including mathematical libraries, starting from mathematical libraries, statistics libraries, to building complex frameworks and applications. Everything is possible in Python. R would not be that extensible in terms of application. So R is more popular as a research tool, and Python is more popular as an application, end-to-end application development tool. So it really depends on your end goals. But these are not barriers. What you need to understand is the crux of the matter. Okay, the mathematics behind it, the techniques, and using those techniques in either of these environments then becomes very simple.
So brilliant, sir. So I believe most individuals have the same query. Somebody would be asking, they are from a completely non-IT background, mechanical background, in .NET and Java.
I am a mechanical engineer, just to let you know. Okay. So that should answer some of your questions.
Very true. So this is most of the queries like this, and most of the individuals are looking forward to do a transition. So I believe, thank you so much for answering the questions, sir, and hopefully we'll take another questions. But I believe I'll quickly take the takeaway session because most.
Sure. Thank you, Ritin, and wish you all the best. It was, I think the questions were great, and hope these sessions are giving you a glimpse into the importance of data and what can be done with data. It is definitely an interesting field, and perhaps sky is the limit. Also a dangerous field if you look at all the deep fakes and all that are coming up. So be careful and all the best.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
So, okay.
Dr. Kulkarni.
Thank you, Bhupesh.